And it has happened in the past. We went lower, and at the end, it was more expensive. So we have to rehire, it was just a mess. So best value to me is the best approach. I know that for other things, maybe, but the flexibility is just in my head. It depends on who's making the call. So yeah, we'll probably have to figure it out. The right people are the ones that is an issue and a risk, true statement, but it's also the other way around if we don't have that flexibility. So it's two sides of the coin.
One of the aspects of best value is you can put a lot of emphasis on previous performance, and something I think I mentioned yesterday. I mean, the only true predictor of future performance is past performance, and if you put a lot of emphasis on previous performance, it helps develop relationships with contractors to continue. It gives the contractor an advantage if you work with them, but also that relationship, you understand how to work with a given contractor. You don't have to start from scratch. I want to make a comment about a rigid FAR approach versus more flexible AMS approach. A lot of times it's a mentality. You find some people fit well into a flexible approach. I used to teach a class to a mixture of business and students. And I showed, if you're familiar with design thinking, I showed this design thinking from a group. What was the name of that group? It wasn't Frog Design. It was one of those other design contractors that uses this really wild, wide open, loosey-goosey sort of a design forum called Design Thinking. And I showed this video to the class, and I asked people, how many people want to do that? And this is interesting. All the business students, their hands would shoot up and say, yeah, man, I'm into that. I'd love to work in an environment like that. The engineering students, on the other hand, they want structure. And, they want things defined, and they would tend to say, no way. That sounds like that looks like my worst nightmare. So a lot of times it's sort of, some people feel more comfortable, as some contractors feel more comfortable with structure, and other people like it a little bit more open for negotiation and determination as needs and clarity about needs arise. Samaya says, bet that was interesting. It was very interesting. I wish I had time to show something like that in this course. I think it would be a good insight. What was the name? If you're super interested and you know anything about design thinking, Google ABC Deep Dive is the name of it. And it's a little 3-part video on design thinking, and it was with IDEO is the name of the design. It's one of the major IDEO, Design Continuum, Frog Design. I used to work for Frog Design, but those are the big design contract product design houses. So if you're interested, Google that. I think you'd enjoy it. Okay. William, AMS allows flexibility as long as you can defend your decision. Yes. You always have to defend. You can't make a decision off the hip. FAR by its structure automatically justifies. That's it. William, thank you. That's a very, very good point. Even with flexibility, it still needs to be a solid, well-justified business decision. Okay. You guys, thank you. Good discussion. I appreciate your time on that. We've got about 10 more minutes before we take our first break. Matter of fact, those of you who survive on coffee, let me give you the option. We can take a break now and come back at 10 o'clock Eastern, or I can talk for 10 minutes when we get into Module 3, contract formation. If you prefer to take a break now, give me a green thumbs up. If you prefer to wait until 10 o'clock, I'll wait until 10. I'll talk for another 10 minutes. So this is democratic. My apologies to Jake and Maria. You've been outvoted, it looks like. So I'm going to talk for the next 10 minutes, and then we'll take a break as close as possible to straight up at the hour. So let's move on to Module 3 and talk about contract formation. This is phase 2 of the procurement phases. The objectives, upon completion of this lesson, you'll be able to discuss critical elements all about the contract formation phase. You'll understand screening information requests and solicitations of offers. We'll talk about the whole source selection process, contract award, and how to resolve protests and contract disputes. I said this is phase 2 of the FAA procurement lifecycle, dealing with contract formation. It has 3 major steps: soliciting offers, evaluating bids, and awarding contracts. Straight up. This is where the CO, the contracting officer, steps up. It's their role, the contracting officer's role, to guide the government through these 3 steps of this phase, the contract formation phase. So the 3 functions are solicitation, evaluation, and award. Solicitation here is the first basic function of this phase. FAA solicits offers by advertising its needs and then actively pursuing competition for those procurements. So some of the questions you might ask, or the relevant questions in this phase, is the procurement complex and non-commercial, or is it a commercial product, and should we pursue a more simplified purchase process? How can we best communicate the need to the market? How should we respond to feedback from the market? That was part of our last discussion. How much feedback is healthy in the development of this whole procurement? Should this solicitation be amended or even canceled, redirected, or reissued based upon market feedback? The next step in the evaluation is carrying out the source selection plans. We evaluate bids, quotes, proposals based on technical or business or managerial aspects: price, past performance, quality. Consider some of the questions. Which proposals should be submitted or considered? How do we come up with a short list or down select? What discussion should we conduct with contractors, with the offers? What strategies or tactics, especially when you get into negotiation? Can we be smart about negotiation, use negotiation tactics in discussing the proposals? And how do we go about ensuring that we get the best value, finding a best and final offer if possible from the contractors? And the last step is award. And the primary questions are, is the offer who's in line for the award responsible? Is the offer free of any mistakes, clerical or otherwise? Does it represent best value? Did we actually achieve best value for the FAA? How are we going to execute this contract? How are we going to deal with protests, resolve these protests? And how are there any alleged mistakes in our process or in the proposal? So we're going to turn to policies and guidance that deal with the SIR, or the screening information request. And this is probably, we're almost at the top of the hour. So this is probably a good time before we get into the SIR for us to go ahead and take a break. So this is my compromise. We didn't wait to the top of the hour. We didn't do it at 10 till the hour. So it's 5 till right now. I'm going to give you, let's give us a 10-minute break, and we'll get back together at 5 minutes after the hour. And just as always, I'm going to put you into the lobby, and I'm going to hang around for a couple minutes in case anybody has any questions. So I'll see you in about 10 minutes.
Marcy. It's loading. It's not up yet. There we go. Okay. 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 Got it. Yeah, because I saw that, the breakout room view, and it's like, I don't want to click that right in the middle of class because I don't know what it'll do. Because I was wondering how people did that. Okay. 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 And then Jim's the one that normally puts them in the breakout, right? Okay. Awesome. Okay, yeah, because I'm sitting there and I'm watching both you and Stacy and LaShonda's class, and yeah, I'm getting them into their breakout groups. It's like, how are they doing this? Awesome. All right, that's great. Okay, yeah, so then I have no problem taking over and trying to do my best as far as assisting people or cueing Jim or whatever if we need to. But he's okay. No, that's fine, but it's in the alphabetical order, so that's fine. Awesome. No, that's great. And then, oh yeah, no, I appreciate you letting me help out so we can keep this interview going. Yeah, you're gonna enjoy her. Yeah. Okie dokie. And if I have any questions, I will madly ping you. All right. Thanks, Marcy. Bye.
Okay, everybody got your coffee? Welcome back. We're ready to go again. We're going to talk a little bit about SIRs, SIRs, screening information requests. If everybody's back and got their coffee, motivated and ready to go, give me a green thumbs up and we'll get out of park and put this thing in first gear and roll forward. All right. We're lighting up like a Christmas tree, all kinds of green thumbs. So the policy, the FAA on evaluating and selecting sources for complex, non-commercial competitive parts consists of up to 5 phases. They're listed here. Planning, screening, selection, debriefing might be required, and lessons learned. Screening involves determining which of the contractors offers the best value for the FAA. The process of the FAA is flexible on screening. You can make an award after just one screening request, in which case, let's say if you do one screening request and all the bidders are determined to be have a technically compliant offer, then you can focus on just price, because your short list is conforming on all technical requirements. The number of screening steps, it will vary, of course, with the complexity of the procurement. So let me ask this: is the contract for our swim scenario? Is it complex, non-commercial? Should it be competitive? Yes, competitive, definitely. I think we have a pretty good handle on what the requirements are. It'd be pretty easy to get good competition. Bonnie says it's non-complex. I would agree with that too. It is not complex. It's not complicated. The swim system itself is complex and complicated, but the swim contract that we're talking about is really more of an administrative function. Mostly, like Eric says, admin support. So it should definitely be competitive. The database aspect of it is a relatively minor and probably some standard off-the-shelf software package to fulfill that requirement. So I would agree with all those comments. So SIRS, screening information request, is for documentation, information, presentations, sometimes proposals, and sometimes even binding offers. You submit a screening information request and ask for the contractor to commit when the requirements are very, very clear. The purpose is really just to get information, help you identify the best value for the FAA, make a selection, and finally award a contract. I mentioned the FAA is allowed to make a decision after just one screening information request or a series of screening information requests. It all depends on the particular procurement, the type of product or service that's being acquired, and the approach that was selected in the source selection. So if the purpose is a request for information or some kind of an offer to establish maybe a qualified vendor list or a short list, the contents could be first reference to a Paper Reduction Act, request for information, a closing date on the for submittal of the information requested. It's important to always provide the evaluation criteria so the vendor understands how to shape their offer to meet that criteria. Some kind of statement informing the vendors of how communication is going to be carried out throughout this procurement process, how we're going to discuss things with the vendor, and a schedule for when they can expect revisions or selection or final determination. FAA uses something called ConWrite it's used by contracting organizations to assemble SIRs and contracts. Anybody here had any experience with ConWrite with the FAA? Okay, Olena says no. I've never had any experience. It's referenced as part of the acquisition management system. I was hoping maybe somebody could could make a comment on their experience with it. But it looks like I need to do a little bit more research. Like I said, I haven't had any experience with it, and it doesn't seem like anybody here in this group of 20 has had any experience with it. But, Matthew says ConWrite is gone. Oh, that's interesting. So it's not used by the FAA anymore?
We do not use it. We used to use it. Now we form the solicitation in PRISM.
Okay, right, directly within PRISM. Okay, well, I need to make a note of that. But I'll follow up to make sure that's. We talked about PRISM a little bit later in the discussion today. Yours says you'd never heard of ConWrite. Okay, only PRISM. Okay, that makes sense. Well, that's good. I appreciate the update on that. So the course materials that I'm using are out of date. So categories, 3 categories of screening information request. Qualification, screening information, request for offer. So qualification, the whole idea is to create a qualified vendor list or a short list, meet the minimum capabilities requirements. So we request from the vendor qualification information to allow that process and that short list to be developed. Screening information is to determine which offer is most likely to receive the reward based on best value. So the focus is on what are the key discriminators? How are we going to determine which vendors are better or not as good as others? So the information requested focuses on those discriminators. In a request for offer, we're asking the vendors, it's a SIR that we're asking the vendors to formally commit to provide products and services. So the response in that case is actually a binding offer. And it can take the form of a proposed contract or sometimes even a purchase order. The qualified vendor list, it lists those contracts whose products or services have been examined, tested, evaluated, and accepted as qualified vendors. It establishes for selection processes a pool of vendors, so you don't have to deal with a plethora of bids. You won't accept bids from people who are not already pre-qualified. So qualified vendor lists help streamline the whole repetitive procurement process. They're most appropriate for recurring or repetitive requirements. So when planning a qualified vendor list, the team should consider the scope of work closely to avoid any conflicts. Think if there's some way that you can do some testing or capability demonstration or samples from vendors to qualify them, to put them on the qualified vendor list. Make sure you state who will bear the cost of any kind of testing or demonstration, and secure the funds necessary for activities on the part of the FAA. If the amount of the procurement is supposed to exceed $100,000, remember that the contract officer is required to make a public announcement. We talked about that briefly yesterday. So communications with offers in the FAA takes place throughout the source selection process. And like we noticed in our discussion earlier, sometimes that's a little bit more. Oh, Matthew, correction. It looks like the threshold was raised from 100,000 to 150,000 in April. Okay, so the public announcement threshold. $150K as of April. But raised again in October. Okay, also the requirement for independent government cost estimate. Okay, and legal reviews. Whoa. Awesome. Okay, I'll make that correction between now and next time I teach this class. Matthew, thanks. Man, I can't thank you enough. Somebody's got to keep me straight when my wife isn't here. Okay, let's talk about communication with offers. Communication, of course, like we discussed earlier, it's a little bit more encouraged with the FAA than it is with FAR agencies. It starts in the planning phase and it continues all the way up through contract award during screening, selection, debriefing. Should be coordinated with the CO. And any screening information request should communicate to the vendors how communication is supposed to take place. So you don't have Wild West of communication taking place. So good communications help with this mutual understanding, clarify any kind of uncertainty on the part of the contractor, understand that, communicate the needs, the desires of the FAA. Any information disclosed on the part of a vendor is fair game. It should be considered as part of the evaluation of the offer or submittal. So sometimes the FAA holds a pre-submittal conference, and sometimes they conduct just one-on-one meetings with individual offers. One-on-one communication, again, it's at the discretion of the service organization. Don't hesitate to communicate one-on-one with offers. It's not discouraged because it's considered specific offer, specific communication is okay in a one-on-one setting. But regardless of the forum, whether one-on-one or in a pre-submittal conference with all offers, it's important that the communications don't create an unfair competitive advantage for one contractor. So you have to be careful of what you say and how you say it. If it is something that impacts all offerers, all potential contractors, then it needs to be captured and communicated to everybody. So responses to screening information requests are evaluated by the procurement team. The evaluation criteria is stated or should be stated in the screening information request. The process for the service organization is put together an evaluation team. It should be two things. Number one, it should be limited in size. You don't want to run into the committee effect where so many people are involved in the committee that you go in circles and it's difficult to get anything done. But you want to have a group of people that are dedicated throughout the entire process, the entire acquisition process. So you don't want people coming in and out of an evaluation team. You should apply sound judgment, determining what is appropriate in terms of the variations and adaptations of individual bidders, individual situations. All communications, like I said, from the vendor should be considered as part of the evaluation. Even verifiable information from outside sources should be considered in the evaluation. That means if experience from some other FAA department with a given vendor is open game. That's information that should be considered as part of the determination. That information, though, needs to be disclosed to the offer during the communication process. And it's important that the evaluation team document the results in a final evaluation report. Jane, I'm looking at this link that you put in there. I won't be able to go to there until I get to a break, but could you come off mic for a second and just tell me what is this link?
Sorry, I just figured since we were talking about thresholds, it just is the procurement-related threshold requirements. So if it's like a quick desk reference for something to help out, maybe someone, I don't know.
Okay.
It's a quick little desk flip.
Awesome. Jane, I'll click on it when we go to a break. That's awesome. And I can't thank you enough, you and Matthew, for setting us straight on the revised threshold. Thank you.
Well, yeah.
All right. Got another question. Let's open this up to discussion. Why is it important to make sure that the requirements or evaluation criteria and the basis of the award are all in line and well communicated to the vendors? I think this is going to be a fairly easy discussion. Okay. Ducks in a row is a good technical term that allows the contractors to get their ducks in a row. Avoid protests. Martina, that's extremely good content, especially with the informality of the FAA procurement process. In other words, openness to communication with vendors. If they find out that the requirements and the criteria for evaluation and the actual award do not line up, you're going to get slapped. Somebody's going to contract over right away with a complaint. Prevent protests, performance, yeah, fair and open. Yep, it'll be fair and open. That's a big driver in any kind of procurement. So you get what you need. Yeah, if they aren't in line, the requirements, evaluation criteria, and the actual award basis are not in line, that's sort of an indication that the FAA doesn't really have a good handle on what they need and what they want, let alone how they're going to go about it. So that's I guess, indicative of a shortcoming on the FAA side. Minimize disputes, Jake says that you're right on target. So the volume of disputes and claims is a reflection of a lack of coordination and a lack of a well-designed effort on the part of the FAA. Good. Let's see. Durs says a protest can delay an award for about a year. Have you experienced that much of a delay as a result of protests? Yeah, when a valid protests come up, you might have be forced to issue some kind of a stop work order on the part of a contractor, or maybe a award is made and somebody challenges that. You might have to issue a stop work order pending resolution of that challenge. Durst says it can take up to a year. Let me ask this: have you actually experienced something with that much of a delay? She says yes. Wow, an entire year.
Yes, it was horrible. Like,
painful.
And that contractor actually won the problem.
Oh, they decided just to leave it, move on.
Yeah, it was really painful. I got in there in the middle of everything. I was not part of, the work. I was just like the post-work work, and it was painful because we had to extend, do another extension. It was just bad. So, yeah.
And on the contractor side, when you get an award, you gear up Sometimes you hire people, you commit resources to it, you do your budget and planning for it and get ready to execute, and then you get slapped with a stop work order because somebody else is complaining. Yeah, that's painful. All of a sudden, you're in the starting blocks waiting for the gun to fire, and you can't move forward. And how long can you stay there? How long can you reserve those resources or that personnel or commit those costs before you think this is enough? A year? No way. As a contractor, I can understand a contractor walking after receiving a stop order for that amount of time. Oh, and you said that the person with the claim actually won the protest. Oh, that's doubly painful. Okay, well that's a good lesson. Thank you for sharing that. All right, I'm going to touch on a little bit of additional evaluation guidance. On screening and evaluations, the CO, along with the procurement team, needs to formulate the evaluation criteria, how they're going to screen and qualify the vendors. And it needs to focus on what is going to differentiate, what are the discriminators that are going to differentiate between one evaluator versus another. It makes no sense to have some evaluation criteria up there where everybody meets, ahead of time, everybody meets that criteria. So tailor to the requirement, make sure you're asking about or looking for at criteria that are going to help discriminate, and then put it into an evaluation plan and communicate to the vendors how they're going to be evaluated. When you're evaluating vendors, the CO worked with the program office to come up with this evaluation plan. The evaluators need to follow the plan. The number of vendors that you consider in the qualified vendor list should be appropriate depending upon the requirements and what's being purchased. The vendor list shouldn't be too large or unmanageable. So there shouldn't be too many, but it shouldn't be so small or focused that you don't get adequate competition. So it's a balance between the two. Again, focus on distinguishing factors, but still encourage competition so we can get to the best value. Updating the qualified vendor list needs to take place periodically. Sometimes you need to look at a list if it's been stagnant for a long time and get written confirmation from the vendors that they still desire to be a part of the list. If a vendor at any time has some sort of performance difficulties, the CO may request that the vendor be requalified, whatever that takes, just samples, program communication, some sort of demonstration, but you might remove that vendor from the list and ask that they be requalified. Sometimes the qualified vendor list gets completely canceled. If it's underutilized, consider canceling. Notify the vendors in writing, give a brief explanation as to why, and if there's any plans to reestablish, or maybe combine it with some other requirements, or make it a part of some other qualified vendor list. The information, you can decide whether the names of the firms should be public information. It's helpful a lot of times for people considering subcontracting arrangements to know who the prime contractors might be for a given procurement so they can pursue those opportunities, especially when you get into small business. And incentives and programs to involve small businesses in with the procurement. And the CO could also consider sharing a qualified vendor list with other FAA offices for their procurements. So the products have to meet specification requirements. It's important that being on the list does not constitute an endorsement by any kind. It just means they meet the minimum requirements. It doesn't release a supplier from any kind of compliance with the specification. So there might be a re-examining of a product or manufacturer, especially if the manufacturer has modified the product or changed the material or some kind of a process sufficiently to bring the qualification into question. If the specification on the part of the FAA has been amended or revised, it might require some sort of requalification as necessary, just to make sure that the quality is still maintained in conformance with the specifications. So this brings us on to the next, as part of the contract formation phase. I'm going to jump back to Eric's comment because it's extremely relevant. He said, we need to strictly manage and document any score sheets that you use. The score sheets is part of your evaluation criteria. The score sheet itself isn't necessarily public information, but if there is a claim, it is discoverable. If the claim is resolved, ODRA usually has the power for in the discovery phase to demand that the score sheets be made public. You need to document and maintain those score sheets in case there's a claim against a contract award. And something else, if the claim fails, as part of the U.S. legal system, right or wrong, anybody can sue anybody for anything. So if a contractor appeals to ODRA and their claim is denied, they always have the avenue of pursuing civil litigation. And in civil litigation, everything is discoverable. Now, the FAA legal counsel would probably pursue a summary judgment saying, look, we reviewed this as part of ODRA and asked the court to provide a summary judgment to dismiss a claim. But failing that, it might still move forward with some sort of painful civil discovery process. So let's talk about source selection. By the way, my feeling on something actually goes to civil litigation, there's a guy who wrote a book called Mark McCormick. He wrote a couple books. One was Everything You Don't Learn at Harvard, or What the Harvard MBA Doesn't Teach You. And the other one was called The Terrible Truth About Lawyers. And one of the comments in that book was that if it actually goes to court, generally what happens is everybody loses and the attorneys win. That's kind of the way that the system is set up. It's usually very painful and very expensive. So anything you can do to get to some sort of settlement before it actually goes to civil litigation is always advantageous. One approach, and this is jumping way ahead, but this is a Jim Brown comment. One approach is you can identify the elements of a contract that are part of a claim or litigation and say subtle aspects of it. If you can settle, well, this part of it we're okay, and we can pay for that because that delivery or submittal or deliverable was okay, so we can take that off. Anything you can take off the contract, if you can settle aspects of the claim, you remove it from the table, you remove the dollar value of the residual claim. And if you can get the dollar value down on a residual claim by agreeing to aspects of it, you can potentially get to a point where what's left on the table is not worth pursuing litigation, and it goes away. So just keep that in mind as a litigation strategy. Of course, that's usually over your head or my head. That's part of FAA legal counsel. But at some point, the idea is the residual claim gets so small that nobody wants to pursue it. Oh, wow. This is another, Eric, man, I appreciate all your experience. Matter of fact, next time I teach this class, I'm going to invite you to sit in and make these comments. but you made the comment, DLA lost big money due to unfair evaluation selection because of comments that were written in the margins on tech evaluation score sheets. And this is money awarded years after contractor wasn't selected. Eric, you mind going off, turning on your microphone for a second to share a little bit about that experience? That's extremely valuable. So even the comments or scribbles that the evaluation team makes in the margins of your evaluation sheet become discoverable.
Yeah, there was a contract awarded to a shipping company, like a trans-ocean shipping company to ship subsistence out of California overseas. And the evaluators favored one vendor over another and mistakenly communicated back and forth in their tech eval documents and their score sheets that, ways to grade the evaluation to favor the vendor that they wanted, right? So the company that didn't win the contract filed a lawsuit, and because the contracting office kept all of those documents on file, they were discoverable. And in the process of due diligence, the defense lawyers, or I guess the company's lawyers, the suing company, I guess that's the best way to say it. Their lawyers found this stuff, and it turned out that, the judge ruled in their favor, and DLA not only had to pay them compensation for losing for the work they lost for not being awarded the contract, but they also had to pay all their legal fees. So they lost big time money. And this was a couple of years after the contract was awarded, because it takes time. Like you said, it takes sometimes a long time to fight these things. But yeah, it wasn't pretty. And so to be honest with you, what happened is, the last tech eval I was on was for a few $100 million contract, and the DLA contracts office would not provide us any type of score sheet templates or guidance or anything like that, and discouraged us from keeping any, and wouldn't accept any type of documentation that we may have used for notes or anything from the tech eval team. Told us, your notes are your notes, and we don't need them, we don't want them, destroy them when you're done, kind of thing. All they wanted was the final report from the evaluation team.
Wow.
Whereas in the past, I worked in the shop that I worked in the same contract shop before I moved into IT, and we used to provide tech eval teams all of the resources and documentation and sample templates and everything they needed to do a tech eval. And because of this lawsuit, now they'll offer you guidance, and they'll give you a source selection plan, that type of stuff, but nothing else. You're kind of on your own to run the tech eval.
Yeah.
How you see fit in a lot of ways.
Well, I mirror Brian's comments. Dang. Mandatory evidence destruction. That's funny. That's funny.
Kind of along the lines of a little bit of what we were talking about. I also, when I worked in industry, did a lot of work with DHS, and they ran into a situation where their support contractors for their training division run out of FEMA had written a statement of work, basically colluded with the vendor and written a statement of work for a recompete. One of the competing companies, this is really stupid, one of the competing companies turned on track changes in Word and found all the comments from the government employees where they were coaching and mentoring the other contractor, and took them to court. And of course, that was a big to-do, and a lot of those support contractors and government employees got fired over the whole thing.
Yeah.
So
electronic trails last forever. Never forget that. And even, when you erase a file on a disk drive, all you do is you remove the pointer. All the documentation on that file is still there. You've just taken the pointer off of it. So it's still there. It doesn't, unless you reformat the drive, it's not gone. And even when you reformat it, a lot of times, a lot of that stuff is still there. So something else to keep in mind, if it does go to civil litigation, a plaintiff's attorney, a big part of their effort is well, there's two parts. Number one is putting a dollar value on the damages. And the other part is the search for a smoking gun. They'll look for anything. So comment on the margin, track changes to a Word document, anything that is the smoking gun to indicate before a judge that there is culpability on the part of the defendant is what they're looking for. So discovery, wade through all kinds of stuff, but they're looking for that one sentence, that one email, that one comment on the margin that's going to hang this thing when they take it to court. Thank you, Eric. Good comment. I appreciate that. Let's see. Okay, William says sometimes evaluation documents are stamped draft to protect against agency discovery. Yeah, but if I took that to court on the part of a plaintiff, I would still argue that even though it says draft, it still indicates the thought process on the part of the evaluation group. And Eric says, this is why I don't like, okay, back to that legal term, squishy. This is why we don't like squishy. Squishy can potentially open up a whole bottle of worms. Okay, let's see. We've got a little bit of time still before we take our next break. So let me talk about a source selection guide. So a source selection guide outlines the requirements for source selection and contains sections such as, I'm not going to read all these, but how to do an evaluation plan. By the way, there's a source selection guide is an appendix in your student manual, your student handbook for this course. But screening information requests, communications, evaluations and evaluation factors, how to conduct a debrief, oral presentations. It's all, okay, it even says it on the slide. It's an appendix in the student workbook. Now, we fall under the Procurement Integrity Act. I've mentioned that briefly yesterday. It requires safeguarding source selection, not exposing information from one contractor to other contractors. That's a big deal. Matter of fact, it's a major ethics deal when you deal in the U.S. If you do a lot of procurement in foreign countries, you find they're not guided by the same ethics constraints. The U.S. showing the bid from one contractor is considered proprietary and confidential, and show it to somebody else in the U.S. is a big, not only a legal violation, but an ethical violation. But if you deal, I've done a lot of work in Germany, and they freely take. Here's what your competition said. How can you match that? That's considered good competitive practice for procurement. So, but we fall under a federal law that requires confidentiality of contractor proposal information, and there's actually civil and criminal penalties associated with violating that confidentiality. There's also this Procurement Integrity Act also has a lot of provisions in it for safeguarding, let's say, post-employment consulting. That somebody who is formerly with an FAA procurement activity can't turn around and get compensation either as an employee or a contractor or a consultant for somebody who's bidding or supplying to the government. So we said that one of the first things is putting together this evaluation team, source selection and source evaluation team. What are some of the requirements for a source selection team? How should you choose the personnel to be on that source selection team? How should these people be chosen? Just open this up to the floor. What are some thoughts on that? Okay, technical expert, especially if it's technically complicated, requires evaluation of technical capabilities. Definitely want technical expertise. Maria says expertise of any kind. So experience, ideally, brings with experience comes expertise and capabilities, acquisition knowledge. So some training in acquisitions, understanding how to evaluate, come up with evaluation. Maria's correcting your spelling. That makes sense. Selection of the chairperson. Very important. You want a lot of experience and knowledge, especially in the acquisition process for whoever sits in the chair. Unbiased.